Well, it doesn't look like Abdul Carter's had any issues transitioning from linebacker to defensive end, and A.J. Harris looks the part of a number one cornerback.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
When it comes to takeaways from this blue-white game, you have to start with Abdul Carter and A.J. Harris. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. Let me know your takeaways in the comments from the blue-white game. I got 9 of them. And Abdul Carter and A.J. Harris are up first over the course of this episode. And Abdul Carter, this was the best move that Penn State could have made going into the season when you have a new defensive coordinator, right? Manny Diaz leaves, Tom Allen is coming in, and he inherits a former number one defense, right? Those are big shoes to fill, high expectations, and this defense can absolutely stay inside of the top 10. Number one's going to be difficult because it is the top spot, but moving Abdul Carter certainly bridges that gap so there's not a drop-off. Hey, you lost Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac to the NFL draft. You had to make up for that talent by moving a player that just disrupts football, just disrupts opposing game plans for the offense. And Abdul Carter, it looks like he's had little to no transition issues moving from linebacker to defensive end. And I mean, that's Abdul Carter's strong suit, right? Is the fact that he's already a naturally gifted pass rusher, that he's able to attack the line of scrimmage as it is. Very good linebacker, but his best attribute from his linebacker skill set was always getting after the quarterback, being a spy, and just chasing down the play. So this was the best move that Penn State could have made for Tom Allen's first season in Happy Valley. Lightning quick first step. Okay. Abdul Carter, right, as a linebacker, you got to read the play. You got to dissect where the offense is going with the football. Now Abdul Carter can just pin his ears back and go, just bull rush, use some quick moves, and he was always the first one at the point of the attack. It seemed like every single time when he was going after the tackle, he was always the first one off the ball. Every single time. And I get it. It's the scout team, right? How much stock can we put into this, given that Abdul Carter is going up against backups? But quick first step. He was the first one out of anybody along the defensive line, offensive line, honestly, almost at the same speed as the center who was snapping the football. So you can look at it that way. Well, it was a scout offense, but compared to the other defensive linemen that are also starters, Abdul Carter was pretty much the first one off the line of scrimmage. And then you combine him with Denai Dennis Sutton, or think of Amin Vanover and Zariah Fisher, which I will get to later on in the show. This is forming to be a dynamic duo to start with Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter, like Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac. You have DDS and you have Carter here. Then there's A.J. Harris. He, in my opinion, has become the number one cornerback. And I know, don't overreact to a spring game, Zach, right? This is the blue-white game. How much can you actually take away from this? But A.J. Harris was strategically placed on the blue team, and that was also a little switcheroo that they did. Normally, the ones, the starters, the first offense, defense is always on the blue team, and then the white team is usually the backups and the rotational players, right? But they did a little bit of a switch up, it seems, and A.J. Harris, they wanted to see himself and Fleming. Yes, they were going with the scout team defense and offense respectively, but for Harris to go up against the ones, fellow teammates, that his skill level, his potential matches, he showed me that he has the makings of a number one cornerback, the characteristics of a number one cornerback. This isn't about Cam Miller. This isn't about Jalen Kimber. This is about A.J. Harris. We knew he had the potential, being a former 5-star, being a former top 50 player in the country, committed to Georgia once upon a time. But this was exactly what Penn State needed out of the transfer portal. So now you have Abdul Carter, the pass rusher, and then you have A.J. Harris on the back end as the pass defender, right? But let's talk about Harris. Why is he a number one cornerback? A number one cornerback isn't just somebody that can cover well. Certainly, that's what you want them to be, right? You want a pass rusher to be really effective at rushing the passer. But as a cornerback, you have to do more than just follow and shadow wide receivers. Harris led the game in tackles, had 7 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, and a pass breakup in the end zone to keep the first team offense off of the board going into halftime of the blue-white game. Again, the final being 27-0, right? With the white team take, because they were comprised of all the ones and the starters, right? But Harris is a playmaker. He has elements and characteristics that mimic what Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King have done. Now, Joey Porter Jr., much better number one corner when he was on an island compared to Kalen King. Again, this is about Harris. But what I like about Harris and those characteristics, those similarities, is that Harris is not afraid to stick his nose into the play. He is not afraid to make tackles. He is not afraid to make hits. He's not just a back off corner and say, okay, let me follow the wide receiver wherever they go. That's one element to it. But the fact that he's do it all, he's a playmaker. That's what Joey Porter Jr. did at his best with Penn State. And we saw Kalen King make flashes of that as well. So that's what it takes to be a number one cornerback. And A.J. Harris is just that. He just has to reach his true potential. And it's shown there right now. Not afraid to be physical. Penn State is able, they are really good at identifying corners that just like to play football, smash mouth, and get physical when needed. And then the third takeaway here is the scout defense. Scout defense held its own and then some. Very respectable performance out of the backups, the rotational players. Now, it helps when you have Jalen Kimber and A.J. Harris in your secondary to see, hey, what can they do as transfers coming into the program? But they held the starting offense to 13 points until late in the game. Now they didn't have any turnovers, but 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, and that's better than the first string defense, right? So think about that for just a moment. You have that kind of pressure, that kind of, being able to disrupt, whether it was Drew or Bo Prabula, and they were able to get that kind of pressure against the offense. And these are the second, third string players for the most part. That was better than the first string defense going up against the second, third string offensive line, right? Colin Dinkins almost had a pick 6, so I say no turnovers, but the quarterback was, sacked, right? You're not allowed to hit the QB, and it got called back, but he should have had an interception and taken it for the touchdown, and then the blue team would have been on the board, right? No shutout. Jameel Lyons. Teammates weren't kidding when they said that he was ready to break out, and Jameel Lyons has very much impressed and should be a breakout candidate on your board if he isn't already, certainly on mine. And then just other players, like guys like Lamont Payne, who are still young and up and coming in the program, but coming on strong, adding valuable depth to a cornerback spot that had a lot of question marks going into this 2024 season. So those are the first 3. I got 3 more and 3 more in groups after that. And going into the next segment, I don't ever want to hear the words quarterback battle when it comes to Drew Allar and Bo Prabula ever again. I don't. I'm going to discuss that on the other side of this break. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools you need to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even quicker. 2.5 million, that is right, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Become one of them. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. At this point, I don't know how you can legitimately pose the idea that there should be or maybe a quarterback battle at any point in time. Drew Allar has separated himself from Bo Prabula as the best quarterback in this room. Before we get back into the conversation, I want to tell you about Locked On's NFL Mock Draft live on April 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, streaming on Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and now on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from college football experts and even the fantasy football angle too. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today's 24/7 channel and on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Drew Allar is the best quarterback between Bo Prabula, obviously, Ethan Grunkmeyer being fresh into the program here. But I don't want to hear quarterback battle ever again. If you see any reporter, commentator suggesting the idea or opening up having an open competition, I still see those takes on X. And from people that, I respect their opinion when it comes to Penn State sports. But I don't know if it's for clicks. I don't know if it's for impressions, engagement farming, right? What is it about? Because you can't legitimately have Drew Allar and Bo Prabula, the two different skill sets, right? Use them together, complement one another. Drew Allar is a much better passer, and that's the thing. Drew Allar is miles ahead when it comes to being a passing quarterback. But when it comes to being a running quarterback, Bo Prabula's miles ahead. I wish we could combine the two, fuse the two almost, right? Get the best attributes of Bo Prabula and the best attributes of Drew Allar, and you'd have a super quarterback in this case. But if we're talking about overall skill set, right? Who's going to have the highest rating in college football, the college football video game that's being re-released? Drew Allar is the best quarterback too. And video game ratings aside, Drew Allar is, passes the eye test, actually passes the skill set test of who is the best quarterback to lead this Penn State team. And it is Drew Allar. And it's not to say that Bo Prabula and Ethan Grunkmeyer aren't skilled. They're just not as polished, right? They struggled when it came to throwing in the wind. And I know Drew didn't exactly light up the stat sheet either, but 15 of 32 in wind gusts of what? Up to 40, 50 miles an hour, right? They were playing in the elements, even though it didn't rain and snow like that. Those are conditions you might have to see come Big Ten football, true Big Ten football weather, but 2 touchdowns and no turnovers. That is key. That is a key part of Drew Allar's game. No turnovers. 2 interceptions a season ago and didn't throw any in the spring game, given the fact that he did attempt 32 passes. We also got a first look at Andy Kotelnicki's offense. Again, very vanilla, but Andy Kotelnicki is showing strengths in an offense that we did not see little to not at all last year from Mike Yurcich. Now, we didn't see too much, but we saw elements. And that's my 5th takeaway here. You don't want to you can't show a whole lot for 2 reasons. One, you don't want to tip your hand. The cards you're holding, you do not want to show your opponents because this is a public game. This game was televised and everything, streamed, and you also can't expect them to have the playbook down in 3 months. But I like what I was seeing on just a couple select plays here. I think back to when Liam Clifford, he was schemed open. It felt like Mike Yurcich was never really doing that, where receivers were, again, I know the wide receivers weren't that great a season ago, but Andy Kotelnicki, the talent that he had at Kansas, and they had some of in terms of the analytics, right? Pro Football Focus had it as Kansas as one of the best passing offenses, and that was given with the talent they had at wide receiver. So if Andy Kotelnicki can do that, Penn State doesn't have a talent problem. James Franklin keeps reminding us that when it comes to the wide receivers, they don't have a talent problem, but you also need a play caller that's going to be able to scheme them open. You can't just simply rely on, can this wide receiver win every single matchup time and time again? That's too much to ask. That is too much to ask, especially in this Big Ten conference that is expanding. But scheming guys wide open. I mean, Andrew Rappleyea on the touchdown to finish the game, and Liam Clifford on his select catches was able to scheme those routes open, and they were open by a mile. So it's good to see those elements of an Andy Kotelnicki offense in a first look. That's it's promising. It's promising, and he utilized the talents of both the quarterbacks properly. Again, like I said, Drew Allar miles ahead when it comes to passing. Bo Prabula's miles ahead when it comes to running. They're going to use the elements of both quarterbacks. It's not going to be an even 50-50 split. Drew Allar, if they're in a game-winning drive situation, it's going to be Allar. But Bo Prabula is I think we're going to see Bo Prabula a lot more in 2024, as we should, something Mike Yurcich neglected to do. I don't know why. I really don't at the end of the day. Then a sixth takeaway here. Penn State might have one of the best running back rooms in all of the country. I mean that. Big Ten Conference aside, I'm talking all of the country here. You return Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen as co-starters, right? The third-year co-starters. And I know they didn't play in the game, bumps and bruises, and they protected Singleton, as Franklin explained. But then you have Quentin Martin, who comes in as a true freshman, early enrollee, and Cam Wallace as well, who has developed, went from a lowly three-star to somebody who is very capable of not enough of coming in on select drives and handling the workload when asked to. So those two are going to compete for the third spot, but that's what I mean. Quentin Martin and Cam Wallace could be a significant backup and possibly a starter at other Power 4 schools, and they're your third and fourth running backs potentially. Not to mention, London Montgomery is getting better, right? Corey Smith is going to be in the fold. There is a lot of talent in this running back room behind Singleton and Allen as it is. Quentin Martin had 2 touchdowns. I'm very high on Quentin Martin. I think Martin has all the potential in the world. I think he can be an all-conference running back, All-America. That's very high praise, and I got to be careful because I've said that about Singleton and Allen and the way that Penn State uses running backs. Those guys are never going to get the workload to pad the stat sheets to get them into that conversation and that recognition. But the way that they're utilized in terms of efficiency, Quentin Martin absolutely can be a all-conference type of running back and should be considered in the future an all-country, one of the best in the country as a running back when his college career is finished. But with Cam Wallace taking a step forward, I was concerned about Trey Potts moving on. I was originally, but not anymore. I got 3 more takeaways, including talking about the wide receivers, Andrew Rappleyea, ascension up the depth chart, and Amin Vanover. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on each and every game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets. That's right, $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose, no matter what. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. That is FanDuel.com/lockedon, and make your first bet an automatic win. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. As a friendly reminder, let me know in the comments your takeaways, what you noticed from the blue-white game here in 2024. In the final segment, Trey Wallace is your #1 wide receiver, not Julian Fleming, Keandre Lambert-Smith. A little bit more on him as we talk about the transfer portal and everything else later on this week as it does reopen. But as of right now, Wallace is your #1 wide receiver, not Fleming, not Keandre Lambert-Smith. Again, not with the team at the moment or anybody else. And that is understandable to an extent. I mean, Wallace has been with the program a lot longer, but Fleming has the better pedigree, right? Former 5-star, one of the best wide receivers out of high school, went to Ohio State, and he's truly the veteran, right? He's been around college football a little bit longer. But I also have to admit that a new offensive coordinator gives everyone an even starting point, right? I know James Franklin's the head coach, but Andy Kotelnicki's calling plays. He is running the offense. It is his. He's the head coach of the offense. So I feel like that gives everyone an even starting point, albeit Wallace has been at Penn State longer than Julian Fleming. But as far as Wallace's performance goes, 5 receptions on 7 targets, 72 yards, clearly one of Drew Allar's favorite wide receivers, aside from Caden Saunders, right? And we'll talk about Rappleyea in a second. He's a tight end. But in terms of wideouts, Caden Saunders and Wallace got the most attention. And Wallace can be a very good wideout as long as he remains healthy. As long as he remains healthy, he gets open. I would say the only thing that I can be critical of Wallace right now is just tracking the football in the air. if there's ever a one-on-one situation where he's got to win a jump ball, I just want to see Wallace perfect that. But he has the athleticism. He can sky high and go get the football. It's just a matter of being able to pinpoint it with the vision. Let's move to Rappleyea because I've mentioned Andrew Rappleyea a lot on this podcast. The everydayers remember this, but Andrew Rappleyea has certainly impressed me over his time being a true freshman and then now going into his second season with Penn State. He's your number 2 tight end behind Tyler Warren. He is. At least that's how they're acting, right? The way that he had attention in the offense. And maybe, again, we don't know. Was Khalil Dinkins dealing with any bumps and bruises? He went today in the blue and white game. I don't have any information on that. I don't know. But in terms of who got the most attention, who got the most usage, it's Rappleyea. And I've liked what I've seen at Rappleyea in practice. He is that good. He is that good to jump up the depth chart and be the number 2 tight end. And I like Khalil Dinkins. I think that he's good, and he's had a good start to his career for Penn State. But Rappleyea can't be ignored at this point. Someone that I've mentioned a lot on the show. I think and hopefully Penn State will be able to maintain that tight end room. Transfer portal reopening, right? You have Khalil Dinkins, Jerry Cross, Tyler Warren, Luke Reynolds, right? Andrew Rappleyea, Joey Schlaffer has gotten better too. That's a lot of tight ends. And in this Penn State offense, they're going to depth matters, of course, but primarily Penn State's going to, they can only use realistically 3 tight. I mean, I guess they can put as many as they want out there, right? And they could technically put 5 after the offensive lineman and the quarterback, right? But they're never going to do that. But realistically, in formations for Kotelnicki's offense, they're going to use 2 and 3 tight end sets. And that means that people might be disappointed if they're going to move the depth chart around. Going to Amin Vanover, and this is the final takeaway before we preview what's next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Amin Vanover gives Penn State the best chance of having one of the best defensive end units in the conference. I know what Ohio State's returning. Don't get me wrong. JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, of course, the Abdul Carter and Denai Sutton. I'll take them ahead. But Ohio State and Penn State are going to have the best defensive end rooms as it is, the best defensive end units, and players like Amin Vanover give the Nittany Lions, put them into that conversation, into that debate. I mean, James Franklin praised him significantly after the blue-white game. I mean, really, he went on a soapbox speech about Amin Vanover. Vanover's very talented. He's a different kind of defensive end, though. He's an edge setter. He is a run stopper because he's a bigger defensive end. So what he is going to sacrifice in terms of speed, he gets back with strength and physicality. So he's more of a player that can change the direction of a running play. I'd absolutely take him as a pass rusher. But if we're talking who has the best run defensibility, it's going to be Amin Vanover here. I really would argue that in terms of who is the best run stuffer among the defensive ends, probably be Amin Vanover first. Massive for a defensive end. I think he was projecting as a defensive tackle originally, and James Franklin alluded to how he's just had a different kind of journey through Penn State, and he's gotten to this point, and I think that's why he praised them so much. But he did it all in the blue-white game. Truly did it all. Had 1 sack, had an interception for the defense. I mean, that rotation. So that's why I started the show off the way I did, and I wanted to talk about them later. Abdul Carter, Denai Sutton, Amin Vanover, Zariah Fisher, don't forget about him, Jameel Lyons, and oh yeah, Smith Vilbert comes back too. That 6-player rotation at defensive end is pretty legitimate. That is a really, really talented defensive end unit for Penn State. So yeah, they lost Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac, but I get it. Future NFL starters, Chop Robinson has the potential to be a star in the pros. Penn State is not lacking any talent, any depth at this defensive end spot. That'll do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. Coming up over the course of this week, transfer portal reopens, and that is a huge deal. Players can officially enter the portal on Tuesday, April 16th. And remember, Penn State has about a dozen scholarships over the limit, which means there's going to be at least a double-digit number of departures for Penn State. And then if Penn State wants to go get any players that they are interested that are going into the transfer portal, Penn State's also going to have to lose potentially even more departures. So you could see probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 12, maybe even up to 15, 16 Penn State players go into the transfer portal. And that's certainly going to be something certainly going to keep me busy here. And I hope you'll join me for those conversations. I'll have more takeaways from Blue White. Keandre Lambert-Smith, is he going to go into the portal? What's the state there? But ultimately, some transfer portal discussions over the course of next week, as there's going to be a lot of news here, and we're going to talk about it all right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks again for checking out this episode of Locked On Nittany Lions. If you enjoyed this content, leave a like. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments, and share this episode with friends and family. And if you're not already, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows covering each and every league. You can find Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, and it's now available on the free Fire TV channels app.